All right, guys, I'm going to preface this video with some information and thoughts even before the opening, and then we'll do a box opening. The more we've got this truck and the more we've talked to people, uh, the more it comes down to a moral decision on whether you want to support something like this. When we made an original post on Facebook mentioning that we picked one up, and it was because a lot of people were asking about this truck and nobody had a video. Since then, a couple guys after I made that post have went out and made videos very quickly. We were out at USTE, couldn't make the video until we got back, and even then was kind of discouraged and just took a while to get the video done. We did a little bit of a box opening literally hours before our plane left, right before we left the house, kind of as we were waiting since we took the day off, and did the box opening so that we can get it out of the box and take it with us to USTE. But after having it for a while and again talking to people, there's moral decisions that have to be made. It is a knockoff. It is an unlicensed body. The reason something like this can be made as cheap as it is because the company that's producing it has no design work in it. None, right? They didn't design the body from scratch. It's straight up just a Jeep copy. It's probably off of another toy. It does look fantastic, but it's not licensed. So licensing is very expensive for RC cars. Something we learned while we were out at USTE. We actually talked to an Axial employee, one of the guys out there, and we talked a lot about this truck. And I'm not changing my opinion on it because my first impressions it seems good, and it is not horrible. It's not a horrible truck, and you'll see my discovery of things as the video goes on. But the truck, again, it is a knockoff. I wasn't sure at first when we first got it. I was like, well, it looks like we've got axial links and stuff, and the axles are very similar to axials, and there are some differences, but it is very much a knockoff. And again, they can produce this truck for cheap because they didn't have to put any R&D into it, no design work, no licensing. Like I was going to say, after speaking with the guy at Axial, we talked a lot about licensing and other stuff in general, but licensing for a Jeep, for an RC, any car really, for an RC is totally different than like just licensing for a general toy. And it costs a lot more money to license RC bodies, even like Proline and those guys that produce Lexan bodies. It costs them a lot to get the license to be able to produce the body for those vehicles. So when you don't have to pay that cost to license the Jeep body, it drops your price quite a bit. But it also means that everybody else out there trying to do it right, you're doing a disservice to because they do have to pay for that license. So if you want cool bodies from real vehicles, you got to kind of support those companies that are actually paying for the licenses to get those bodies and those rights to those bodies. They're trying to bring it to you legally and in a way that satisfies even the original designer of the body, right? Jeep designed this body. They spent millions of dollars. And of course, they're selling Jeeps. You're saying this is just a toy. And that's just the way it works. There's intellectual property rights, and those people that own that stuff have a right to it. And actually, it's funny. I just realized that if you go on there's some Chinese video websites. They literally copy all of our videos. Me and all the other YouTubers, they just copy our videos and re-upload them to the other Chinese sites. It's part of the Chinese culture. It always kind of has been, and I think it's slowly changing because a lot of newer Chinese manufacturers are realizing to be part of the global economy and global business, you've got to try to follow some of those rules. So if you want to sell in the US, you got to try to follow the rules. Try not to just copy and abide by copyright and intellectual property rights. Anyway, I'm kind of going off here, but the more I thought about it, the more I want to make sure you know what you're getting into if you pick one of these up. I mentioned in the video, it is good for somebody new who can't afford, a $150 truck, but just know what you're supporting, right? So the Axial guy also made a really good point. If these guys spent the money to get the license on this body, they would have killed it. Do a little bit more of their own design on the chassis, it probably would have killed it if they could get it at the same price point. Highly unlikely, though, once you pay for licensing for the body and you pay for design work to produce new parts, and you're not just using already designed parts that are 3D scanned and remolded and reprinted, because that's probably what they did here. Like I said, some is unique, some of it's not Axial, the chassis rails and stuff, and we'll go over that. But again, I'm kind of ranting here, but it's important to know what you're supporting. If you want future products from Axial, if you want future licenses on different bodies from different manufacturers, you got to support the companies that are doing it right. Try not to support the companies that are basically just ripping people off. And it's not ripping the customer off, but it's ripping off the other companies and whatnot. So again, it's just kind of where your morals are. I mean, we wouldn't have bought this if it wasn't for all the people in the Facebook groups for like 2 days. Just be like, anybody know anything about this truck? Anybody have one? Why don't the YouTubers have a review on it yet? So I was like, I'll be the first to order it. I'll take the hit just to show you guys what it's about. I had no idea if it was a complete knockoff. Obviously, I knew the license wasn't, or the body wasn't licensed because it doesn't say Jeep. And I mean, maybe it could have been, but there's no official licensing on any of the packaging. So it's not. And again, I didn't have a clue on how much the chassis was copied until I got it in hand. And not the chassis itself, the chassis rail, but the build itself. And so, yeah, again, after having it for a while, after talking to people, especially after talking to the Axial guy, and understanding about licensing and, you know, how much design work really does go into the trucks, even if it's Axial just releasing the same chassis with different bodies, you know, there's still iterations that happen, and there's a lot that goes into it, guys. So keep that in mind while watching the video. We were kind of learning as we went on what was and wasn't a copy of the real Axial stuff, but let's go. Welcome back to the Shop Mini RC, everybody. I'm Ken, and today we're taking a look at a Amazon crawler. It's kind of a cheaper, lower end crawler from what it looks like. I don't know. We're going to see what it's about. It's on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below if it turns out you really want one of these guys. We don't even know if we want it yet, but we'll find out. They're $79, so it's like $86 after taxes to our door. So here's the packaging. I mean, it looks promising. It's got full ball bearings, coil over shock absorbers, probably just regular springy shocks. Looks like we got a worm gear axle, so that's interesting. And then I don't know about this chassis, but we'll see. We'll see. Comes in blue, white, and we got the black. Here's the dimensions. Looks like it's almost a mix between like a mini Z 4x4. The detail on the body looks really good, and like an SCX. So let's get it open. Boom. Oh, batteries. Our favorite ever USB style charger. Full 7.4 LiPo. Interesting. It's using like cylinder style batteries for that LiPo. That's interesting. Oh, they're not LiPo. It's lithium ion. Alrighty. Okay. Here's our manual. Da-da-da-da. You can pause on any of those pages. First thing you want to do is chuck this if you've got a hobby grade charger. These are not the best for LiPos. Just use a hobby grade charger, guys. All right. Remote feels a little cheapy, but you do have steering trim, throttle trim, steering dual rate, reverse, I assume a bind button. I mean, that's already better than the Traxxas, right? The TRX4M's remote has no features. All right, let's look at this guy. So this body looks pretty damn good. First off, the first thing you'll notice is these are definitely SCX24 wheels, tires, links, even the axle. Look at that axle here. There's a normal SCX24 axle. They look pretty much identical. The upper link portion looks a little different right here. The trusses looks a little different, but the diff covers, there's a front, are pretty much the exact same. We have different knuckles, but these are the same as the SCX knuckles. Everything looks the same. Looks like an SCX. Let's get the body off. So on this guy, the body comes off with pins, which means the body's not coming off accidentally. So that's kind of nice. I do hate body pins. They're just tedious, but sometimes they work, especially on road cars, race cars. When we're doing like racing, you want body pins because you don't want the body to pop off in the middle of a race. But in crawling, it's not nearly as big of a deal. Look at that, a full light kit, electronic setup for the lights. Looks like even these little guys will light up. I was actually just talking about this the other day. It actually comes with 2 batteries. How sweet is that? But I was talking about this today on one of the Facebook groups about why Axial doesn't color code a little better their battery and their motor, because a lot of people end up plugging the battery into the motor and frying their little ESC. So this is pretty sweet that it does. I personally, if I was a manufacturer, would make the motor wire different than the battery wire. I mean, it's just crazy to have the motor wire and the battery wire the same. And then if you do have that, you don't have a safety, so that if I plug the battery into the wrong one, it doesn't fry. They should fix that. Looks like a push button power. Looks like we've got our servo here. The servo housing is interesting. It's not a normal servo tray, so there's definitely a very different style servo tray, but it looks like it hooks the exact same way, hooks up the exact same way as a normal SCX tray. So you can probably use aftermarket SCX parts. One thing I also noticed about this guy, if you look, everything's Phillips heads. that's a fail, right? But for the price, maybe it's fine. Little tiny 030 motor, 030. Let's plug this in. We're gonna plug it in. Bam. Lots of light plugs here. A lot of stuff going on with the lights. LED L, left, LED right, LED front, LED rear. So it looks like we probably have signals. Let's turn this guy on. Ooh, we do. Rears, fronts, and signals. Still got to put our batteries in. Let's put our batteries in. Batteries in. Turn her on. I don't know if that came from this or that. Let me turn up our steering dual rate. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That beeping comes from the transmitter. Got a lot of bumping happening. What is that? Something is rubbing really bad right out of the box. It's definitely this front. Oh, you know what? It's probably... Let's get this on. It's turn signals? We got turn signals? Oh, they are turn signals. Do we have brake? We do have a brake, or reverse. It's more of a brake. Man, what is rubbing? Wish this was a single plug. Oh, it is. It's one big plug. What? Oh, no. Fail. They're all 2 pins. There's no 3 pins. That's okay. It's for lights. Again, we didn't expect amazing electronics, but trying to see how the slow crawl is. What is bumping? It's got to be the drive shaft hitting on something here. I think it's the drive shaft. I don't know. We'll look. We're going to look. So what I think the bumping was is our drive shaft, when it, at any amount of pitch or angle, is actually hitting itself. So you can see we took a little bit out. We dremeled just a tad out there, a tad out there, a little bit here. Hard to see, but we just, I mean, this still has all the melted junk on it. Let's pull it off. There you go. So I just took a little bit out there, a little bit out here, a little bit out there, and a little bit out there. And now we've got a lot more range of motion. So I think that's going to stop it from bumping. It was like literally not going the whole way. It would only get like this much. So now we've got a little more. So let's put it back in, see if that fixed it. And really, here's one that the other side, we're going to do it too, but we haven't done it yet. You can see this side, this way, has plenty of movement. Really, it's this way, right? There's just not enough movement. It's because the tabs or the ears on the shaft are just a little too short. It's just a drive shaft, but you still need it to move. And so, because these ears are too short, it causes these ears to hit prematurely. So we're just going to take a little bit out on each side there. All right, much better. No bounciness, nothing. Everything moves nice and free. The slow crawl on this thing is more like, it's kind of like a V1. It's not the worst, but you know, it's V1 like. Could probably do a little better. I don't know, maybe V1's just a tad better. Nah, they're probably about the same. Because it'll go slow. It's just... Got good wheel speed though. I don't know. We're gonna tear it apart. We're gonna check what's in here. We're gonna check the transmission and just see how similar it really is to an SCX 24. I think they went with this style of servo mount because it gets rid of the tabs, so you actually get better clearance in there. If you notice, the tabs on that servo are actually just cut off, so you kind of get better clearance in the chassis. But we're probably gonna end up taking this guy to USTE with us just for fun, just to show off. Kind of a cool looking body. I don't know. We'll see if we can fit it in our luggage. It'd be a fun one just to kind of show off and be like, yeah, 80 bucks. It does look good though. I mean, the body is amazing. This little rear tire thing is very floppy. It's held on by one tiny, tiny, tiny screw. So that's not ideal. But you'll probably end up removing that anyway. Just extra weight. The body looks great. It's fantastic looking. Very quality. Like Mini Z quality-esque. Interesting little light setup we got going on here. And actually it looks like, oh, there are. It's got positives there. It's like there's no plugs in the side, but there are. They're in the top half. Right there. Anyway, both of the signal lights were blinking at one point. Is that what this... Oh, this is a light switch. In the instructions, it says it's non-functional. Oh, that's awesome. I love that you can turn the lights off. There's no bind button. So you bind it just by turning them on at the same time, basically. You turn on the truck, and then within 5 seconds, turn on the transmitter, and it binds. So there you go. When you're not moving, they hazard light. That's cool. If you give it throttle, they stop hazard lighting. Dude, that's a pretty cool little feature there from a lighting standpoint. I dig that. Anyway, looks like it could be decent. We're not the biggest fans of knockoffs and people knocking off other people, but it's kind of the nature of this hobby, it seems like, and it's inevitable. And so, I mean, it could be a good thing for consumers to be able to, that couldn't normally get an SCX24, maybe pick up one of these, and at least it gets them started, right? And then they can get deeper and deeper into the hobby. I don't know. We'll talk about it more. We'll see. This is definitely an SCX knockoff as far as a lot of these parts are concerned. But again, there's so many aftermarket parts. Are those all knockoffs? I mean, are all the other parts that are made for the SCX24 just knockoffs, but in aluminum or brass? So, I don't know. They're not calling it an SCX24. It just uses a lot of the same geometry and parts and structure and design. But there are differences. So, I don't know. Hate it if you want because it's a knockoff, or love it because it's half the price. There's sacrifices made, right? It's not directly the exact same. I don't know if I like the body clips. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's got sliders, but body clips underneath, that's not ideal, right? Those are gonna grab and hook and whatever. Pain in the butt to turn off. Can you just reach it? Oh, you can reach it down off here. Guess you just hold the button on, off. No, you have to hold it and then it turns off. There we go. So that's nice. You can turn it on and off while it's Yes, we beep while there's no signal. While the body's on, so you don't have to remove the body at all. But again, body clips aren't really ideal from a crawling standpoint. They're just going to grab. But again, sacrifices. Phillips heads versus hexes. That's a big deal. I hate that. Absolutely hate that. But again, you're paying $80 for it. So who knows if the servo's going to last or the motor. Anyway, let's run it for a while. We'll do a full review or a full talk towards the end after we run it. So a little thing I did that I just kind of wanted to show as part of this is I took some shock damper grease. I use these on my Mini Zs. This is 3500 viscosity, the thickness of it. It's very thick. It's not oil. It's like it's more grease, right? It's really thick and it's sticky. But I went ahead and opened up the shocks, and I just put a little in there, coated the inside, tried to get just a little bit in there and dampen these bouncy springs. So look at the back. You can see how bouncy it is. And then the front. Just a little bit. And it may require maintenance. You may have to open them up, clean it out, add some more as you get dirt and dust in there, or as it kind of leaks out, because it will probably leak out just a little bit. Again, I didn't put that much in though. Here, I'll go ahead and show you. I'll open one up and show you. So you can see I just kind of took the shock cap off, and I'm just going to run a little bit of grease in there. And that's actually way more than I need. But we're just going to run a little in there. We're not even going to use all this. I'm just trying to make sure the inside of the shock housing is nice and greased. See, I still didn't use most of it. And then we can kind of work it in just a little. Then we'll put our cap back on. It's going to make a big difference. We'll do the other side and I'll show you. Make sure you're nice and tight. Just going to work it in there and then mount your shock back on. I also went ahead and mounted these further back. You can tell the shock towers or shock is a little bit further back and it's one up, so we're a little lower, and which means we're going to rub a little more, but that's fine. And we're a little further back, which means we have a little bit more articulation. The travel is going to be a little greater. Not a lot, but a little, and it's adjustable, which is nice. I wish the Axial came with shock mounts that were adjustable like that. Let me do the other side and I'll show you the bouncy. And there we have it. Way less bouncy. I mean, it doesn't even really bounce, it just pops it back up. So definitely recommend doing that. You should probably do that in your regular, just stock SCX 24 shocks. Any shocks that are bouncy like that, just throw some dampening grease in there. Again, not oil. It's got to be thick viscosity dampening grease. And just put a little in there. Just to kind of, it'll lube up your shock shaft a little bit. And it'll also just kind of help make it a little more smooth in there. Also should reduce binding if there's any kind of binding. Not that there was any binding really here, but if you did have any kind of binding, yeah, that's way better. Man, I dig it. Yeah, feels good. All right, so I figured I'd just do a quick little crawl test here with this guy. One thing weird about this thing, when you turn it off and turn it back on, you have to reset your steering dual rate. Like out of the box, it comes not with complete steering dual rate, so your steering is a little shallow in the turn radius, but then you can just crank up the dual rate and it'll give you more. We're already maxed out right now, but every time you turn it on or off, you have to do that. So that's kind of sucky, but not a big deal. So that is pretty steep.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Congratulations, we've got the two top drivers at the Jax RC side-by-side race. Guys need, we've got hardware coming out all sides at Team K&K. Head on over there for the best in stainless. K&K hardware tent, go take a look.
All right, guys, we're back from USTE, and we got a lot to say about this guy. We already put a bunch at the beginning of the video. I don't know how deep I really want to dive into more of taking it apart. Yeah, I'm really torn on this thing. I love that it gives people a way that can't afford a normal, $150, $160 truck, an entry point. But I don't know if it's going to be necessarily the best experience either. The turn radius on this thing is horrible. You have to reset your dual rate, your basically your endpoints, your max endpoints every time you turn it on. So that's got to be an electronics thing. The electronics in that regard are just bad. The slow crawl's okay. Like I said, it's kind of like a V1. The servo seems okay. If that's not what's the limiting factor to the turning, I believe it's the electronics. And then as far as like the tolerances on everything else, of course the tolerances aren't going to be perfect. Could you use it as a parts kit type truck? Probably. I mean, the shocks are fine and the links are probably fine. You saw the issue we had with the drive shaft. The skid plate's probably fine. I heard some issues with the diff cover. I mean, we could try that real quick. Let's look. Have I mentioned how much I hate Phillips head screws? That is a huge downside in my opinion. But here's the original diff cover here. Maybe. It's kind of tight actually. Oh, there we go. It was just stuck on the bearing. Here's a brass. We'll throw a brass one on there. It's tight between these like trusses. It's pretty tight, but you can kind of push it in, and then there's like a little gap. I'm not sure where that gap's coming from, but there's a little bit of a gap. Let's try a stock. This is an axial diff cover with no bearing in it, so it should go on just fine. And it's got a little bit of a gap too, so there must be something slightly different in the tolerances there. My guess is you're going to have that throughout the whole thing. I said I was going to open up the transmission. I don't know if I really want to. It looks exactly the same as an axial. So it probably is the same design. Now, whether it's the same tolerances or not, that's another story. It doesn't feel like there's any binding in the drive shaft or anything like that from the transmission standpoint or from the worm gears. So all that seems fine. The chassis is interesting. It is a metal chassis, the chassis rails. So that's interesting. And like I mentioned, I like there's multiple shock points. You got your bumper and Same old same when it comes to here. I'm curious, are the steering knuckles coarse thread or fine thread? I bet you most of this stuff is going to be coarse thread. Yeah, so that's a coarse thread, just like the newer axials. Actually, all of this stuff is going to be coarse thread, is my guess, because so are these. So you can see the difference, coarse thread versus fine thread for anybody newer. If you try to put metal on and you use coarse thread screws into metal, usually you're going to have an issue because metal is fine thread most of the time. I mean, I'm sure there's some cases out there where somebody's put coarse thread into metal, but they're called machine screws versus plastic screws. This is using all plastic screws. A lot of the axial screws are plastic screws, so when you swap over to metal parts, you have no issues. Some of the newer axials, however, do have plastic screws in the knuckles, so you got to be careful. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I mentioned a lot in the beginning. It's going to come down to a moral decision, and I would say the quality is on par with like $100. Like if you talk about the quality, and if this thing were licensed, and if this was, really their own kind of design and not just an obvious exact replica. Like I said, some of the stuff is different. Chassis rails are different, but when you're using the exact same transmission and the exact same axles with worse tolerances or non-consistent tolerances, that's pretty much a knockoff, even though the rails are different. I mean, their wheels are the same. Their knuckles are the same. Steering lengths are literally the same. Servo is innovative. Chassis rails are innovative. Shock towers are innovative. Mounting system is a mini Z style, so that's kind of stolen. But if it were their own thing, I would probably pay $100 for this. If this were a legit licensed body with the light kit, with a servo on axle and their own designs, yeah, I'd feel comfortable paying 100, maybe even 115. Seems good in that regard. Well, they'd have to fix the electronics. That steering is horrible, actually. So 100, I'll stay with 100. But 80 is cheap, kind of for what you're getting. But again, there are some quality issues with the electronics, and you're totally fighting that moral issue of it's a copy and it's non-licensed. So there's no support to the real companies that are producing this stuff. And that makes me sad. I think they really missed the mark. They could have had something really good if they just used their own design of a body that wasn't licensed with this quality of production. And even this quality of production, the tolerances are different, but that's because they're probably trying to copy it. If they made it for their own, then they wouldn't have an issue with any tolerances. And the tolerances amongst the parts work themselves. I'm sure if you bought 5 of these and tried to swap parts between each other, they'd be fine. It's just, it doesn't totally match the axial because it's a copy of the axial. And, they didn't account for their adjustments after scanning it or whatever. Also, the drive shaft here uses the metal ball, so that's a nice upgrade. But again, we had to make adjustment to the drive shafts, so that's a bad thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying to find too many redeeming qualities because I don't agree with the non-licensed and the straight up copying. I believe you should support companies that do original works, and Axial does original works. It's their own design, and they get the licenses when they don't do their own body. So again, you make that decision for yourself. I hope this gave you insight on whether you should or should not buy one of these. I don't even know if they're going to stay on Amazon long. We'll see if Axial or Jeep gives them a cease and desist and tells them to pull it off the market because it's a copy. We'll see. We saw what happened with the Michigan and some of that other stuff when it comes to body licensing. So we know Jeep is no pushover when it comes to protecting their license. I'm not sure if Axial will do anything here, but they might. So it may not be around too much longer on there. I'm not saying go out and get one because of that. I'm just saying that, it may be a flash in the pan and it's gone and it is what it is. Just somebody trying to knock it off. Hopefully you guys appreciate my candidness in the video, and my opinions are, of course, my opinions. If you want to totally support this and you don't care about copyright laws, you don't care about intellectual property rights and the work that went in behind them, then that's on you. I was tempted to return it, but we ran it and stuff, so that's another moral issue. I'm not going to return it after I've already opened it up and taken it apart to show you guys. So we'll hang on to it. I don't know. Maybe we'll just leave it on a shelf because it looks cool. Maybe we'll repurpose the body and repaint it. I'm not sure. Anyway, tell me what you think we should do with it. And yeah, why don't you put down in the comments below total copy. We'll put that down there. That way people don't get the wrong idea. They know it's a total copy. And yeah, I don't really want to support it too much. If it's going to be the only truck you can afford, maybe. But even then, maybe just try to save up and get one that's proper, whether it's a SCX, TRX, or FMS, FCX. Alrighty, guys. I'm ranting again. Sorry about that. We got a ton of stuff coming. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. We have some awesome projects. We have some totally unique projects with awesome companies that have supported it. We've got a 6-month-long project in the works, and it's actually probably 7 now, maybe even 8. I kind of lost track of time on it, but we'll get there. We'll get there, and I'll get to show that to you guys hopefully real soon. These guys are involved. We have some reef stuff on it. We have some 3Flow9 RC, some OG RC, and some Maz Designs, a whole bunch of really cool companies that are really trying to make new stuff. And yeah, we're going to show you what we've got going there soon. So subscribe and follow for that. All right, guys, take care.